A massive federal raid just shook Arizona to its core. 2,847 weapons, millions in cash, and a sitting senator's office at the center of it all. What really happened during this unprecedented investigation? Stay tuned, because the details you're about to see are shocking. The tension was palpable the moment federal agents from the FBI and ICE descended on the Arizona senator's office. Inside, staffers scrambled, papers scattered, and the usual hum of office activity turned into controlled chaos. The agents moved with precision, their presence immediately commanding attention and respect. News cameras outside already had their lenses trained, and live feeds began broadcasting the unprecedented scene to millions across the nation. Inside the office, senator aides and security personnel were ordered to step aside as the agents meticulously went through filing cabinets, desks, and secure storage areas. Reports began trickling in. Weapons were being discovered, numbering in the thousands. A staggering 2,847 firearms had been stored, some meticulously cataloged, others hidden in plain sight. Shockwaves rippled through viewers at home. As the scale of the operation became clear, this was no ordinary inspection. Agents found more than just firearms. Documents, computers, and encrypted drives were seized, revealing financial transactions that hinted at millions of unreported funds moving through complex channels. The atmosphere was tense. Every officer moved deliberately, aware that a single misstep could have political consequences or endanger national security. The senator's office, a space usually dominated by strategic planning and legislative work, had transformed into a scene reminiscent of a high-stakes federal investigation. Onlookers outside the building murmured in disbelief. The media coverage exploded. Headlines changing by the second. Massive federal raid in Arizona senator's office. Thousands of weapons seized, millions of dollars in assets confiscated. Social media erupted, with clips from live streams going viral within minutes. Citizens debated the implications, questions of safety, legality, and political fallout swirled in forums, comment sections, and televised panels. Inside, the team of agents worked tirelessly, cataloging each weapon, photographing evidence, and ensuring every move adhered to federal regulations. Security measures had been heightened days prior, but the discovery of such a vast arsenal highlighted potential oversights. Questions emerged immediately. Why were so many weapons kept in a senator's office? Were these legally registered? Was there a direct connection to broader national security concerns? As the operation continued, the focus shifted to the seized financial assets. Millions of dollars in cash, rare collectibles, and property deeds were carefully recorded and placed into evidence containers. Federal auditors and financial crime experts were called in to trace the origins of these funds, aiming to uncover whether they were linked to any illicit activities. Each seized item represented a potential thread in a much larger narrative, hinting at intricate networks and hidden dealings. News outlets across the country began running detailed analyses, breaking down what 2,847 weapons meant in the context of federal oversight, local laws, and public safety. Interviews with former federal agents suggested that this operation was one of the most extensive and significant raids in recent memory, highlighting the unusual scale and political sensitivity. Commentators debated the optics. Some argued it was a necessary move for national security, while others viewed it as a politically charged spectacle, designed to send a message by mid-afternoon. The raid had drawn attention from lawmakers, both locally and nationally. Statements began pouring in. Some condemned the operation as overreach, while others praised the swift and decisive action by federal authorities. The political tension escalated rapidly, with opposition leaders calling for transparency, demanding to know how such a large cache of weapons could exist in a government office. Legal analysts highlighted the complexities involved. noting that charges could range from mismanagement and unlawful possession to potential violations of federal finance and arms laws as agents prepared to leave with the confiscated items. The scale of the operation became the story itself. The Arizona Senator's office, once a hub of governance, had turned into a cautionary tale about oversight, accountability, and the reach of federal law enforcement. Millions of viewers watched the unfolding drama in real time, social media trending with clips, reactions, and analyses. Each post, each video, spread faster than the last, capturing public attention and driving conversations nationwide. By the end of the operation, law enforcement had meticulously documented, secured, and transported all weapons and assets. The office, now stripped of its vast arsenal, stood silent, a stark contrast to the chaos that had engulfed it just hours prior. While investigations were set to continue, the immediate impact was clear. Federal agencies had sent an unmistakable signal, demonstrating that no space, not even a senator's office, was beyond scrutiny when the rule of law was at stake. This was a moment that would dominate headlines for weeks, provoke political debate, and ignite discussions about the intersection of power, accountability, and national security, a scenario few could have predicted, yet one that now had the entire nation's attention. The morning after the raid, Washington and Arizona were buzzing with reaction. Journalists, political analysts, and citizens scrambled to understand the implications of what had transpired. Social media platforms were flooded with clips showing federal agents meticulously removing 2,847 weapons and stacks of cash from the Arizona Senator's office. Each post seemed to go viral within minutes, sparking heated debates across platforms. Inside the office, investigators continued their work, poring over documents, computers, and encrypted storage devices. Preliminary findings suggested an intricate web of financial transactions spanning multiple states, and possibly even international connections. Federal agents meticulously cross-checked each asset, noting its origin, ownership, and potential links to broader networks. The sheer volume of evidence meant that this investigation was far from over. What had started as a raid was now turning into a way. My only lipstick, Ruby Kiss, Ruby Kiss. Ruby Kiss, Ruby Kiss, only Ruby Kiss. Only Ruby Kiss has the lugs word re-kiss. Wardway Kiss has the word more civil made. More civ smell. More civil long-lasting calor. More civil made. More civil seabeed. Where's civil made? More full-scale inquiry that could have lasting ramifications. Lawmakers quickly issued statements. Some Republicans demanded transparency, questioning why such a large cache of weapons was allowed to accumulate in a senator's office without oversight. Democratic leaders, meanwhile, called for a thorough investigation into the legality and ethics of the senator's actions. Political talk shows and news panels dissected every detail, speculating on what the consequences might be for both the senator and their office staff. The conversation wasn't just local national security analysts began weighing in, emphasizing the risks of storing such an arsenal in a governmental facility. The senator, meanwhile, remained in the public eye but offered little comment. A brief statement was released through their spokesperson, acknowledging the federal investigation and pledging full cooperation. However, the lack of direct response only fueled speculation. Could this be a cover-up? Were there political motivations behind the raid? Reporters pressed these questions, and every minor detail became a potential headline, highlighting the high stakes of the unfolding drama. In the background, federal investigators worked tirelessly. Every weapon, from handguns to assault rifles, was cataloged, tagged, and photographed. Analysts traced serial numbers, checked registrations, and confirmed the legality of each firearm. Investigators also began interviewing office staff, seeking insights into why such a collection had accumulated and whether any internal protocols had been bypassed. It was a meticulous process, aimed at ensuring that the investigation could withstand scrutiny in court. Should charges be filed, financial experts were brought in to examine the millions in assets seized. Early findings indicated unusual financial behavior, large transfers between accounts, unreported cash flows, and documents hinting at complex schemes involving multiple entities. Each discovery raised more questions than answers. Were these funds connected to campaign financing, personal investments, or potentially illicit activity? Federal auditors emphasized the need for careful tracing, noting that any misstep could compromise the case or spark legal challenges. As the day progressed, news of the raid spread internationally. Outlets in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East picked up the story, framing it as a significant example of U.S. federal enforcement reaching even the highest levels of state politics. Analysts debated whether the incident might influence upcoming elections, or if it was indicative of stricter federal oversight across government offices nationwide. The story was no longer just about one senator. It had become a cautionary tale about accountability, transparency, and the responsibilities of public office. Meanwhile, public reactions were swift and divided. Citizens held rallies, posted online petitions, and called for hearings. Social media influencers dissected the images and videos from the raid, highlighting the staggering scale of the weapon cache and the sheer volume of financial records seized. Memes and commentaries circulated, mixing outrage with disbelief. Every clip of federal agents moving through the office, carefully bagging weapons and counting stacks of cash, served to amplify public interest. The story had become a viral phenomenon, dominating trending feeds and driving unprecedented engagement. Inside federal agencies, the tone was serious but calculated. Each agent knew that a case of this magnitude required precision, discipline, and airtight documentation. They were acutely aware that political scrutiny would be intense. Leaks, misinterpretations, or procedural errors could undermine the investigation entirely. As such, every step from evidence collection to transport was carried out with meticulous care. Agents coordinated with legal teams to ensure compliance with all regulations, knowing that any misstep could become a headline in itself by late afternoon. Investigators had secured the majority of the assets. Weapons, cash, documents, and digital devices were transported to secure federal facilities for further examination. Meanwhile, preliminary reports suggested potential violations of arms regulations, mismanagement of public office, and financial discrepancies. Legal experts suggested that the scope of potential charges could range from administrative violations to serious criminal offenses, depending on what further evidence revealed. Political fallout was immediate. Senators and representatives from both parties weighed in, with some calling for urgent oversight hearings and others demanding accountability for the accumulation of such a dangerous cache of weapons. News anchors dissected the implications live on air, speculating on whether this could impact public trust in elected officials. Every angle was explored, with analysts emphasizing the rarity of a raid of this scale and the unprecedented nature of the discoveries as the sun set over Washington and Arizona. The nation was left with a stark realization: no office, regardless of rank or position, was immune to scrutiny. The raid had exposed not just physical weapons and financial assets, but also vulnerabilities in oversight, security, and accountability mechanisms. The story was far from over. Investigations would continue. Political debates would rage, and the public would remain intensely engaged. What had started as a targeted federal operation had transformed into a nationwide spectacle. A narrative about power, responsibility, and the consequences of crossing legal boundaries, as Part 2 concluded with federal agents securing the majority of the assets. The tension didn't ease. It escalated. Analysts began dissecting every angle of the raid on the Arizona senator's office, especially the staggering 2,847 weapons and millions in cash. Experts in law enforcement and political ethics were brought into panels across television networks, emphasizing that such a discovery was virtually unprecedented in modern American politics. Questions poured in. How did such a cache accumulate unnoticed? And what does this reveal about oversight in public offices? Inside federal agencies, the investigation was entering its next phase. Every document collected was meticulously cataloged, and forensic accountants began tracing the flow of cash and assets. Their initial findings suggested a pattern of irregular transactions that, while not immediately criminal, raised severe ethical concerns. Investigators were particularly focused on connections between campaign financing and personal accounts. Every transfer had to be verified and every source confirmed. The meticulous nature of the work meant that even minor errors could compromise the investigation or provide grounds for legal challenges by the senator's defense team. Meanwhile, the public reaction grew more intense. Social media was ablaze with discussions, hashtags, and debates. Clips showing agents counting weapons and moving stacks of cash were shared millions of times, each share amplifying the story's reach. Analysts noticed an unusual spike in engagement on platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, some clips even going viral internationally. Citizens were divided. Some demanded immediate resignation or impeachment, while others questioned whether political motivations influenced the federal raid. The debate quickly moved beyond Arizona, becoming a nationwide conversation about accountability and transparency in government. The senator's office remained eerily quiet amid the storm. Staffers were reportedly under stress, grappling with the public and political fallout. Internal communications leaked hints of panic, with aides scrambling to understand the legal implications and potential repercussions for their professional futures. Lawyers for the senator were already coordinating with federal agencies, requesting documentation and clarification on procedural points, ensuring that every step of the investigation adhered to legal standards. The office was in chaos, yet outwardly attempting to maintain a semblance of calm. Legal experts began weighing in publicly, highlighting potential ramifications for the senator. The scale of the weapons cache alone raised questions about violations of federal and state arms regulations. Additionally, the presence of large sums of cash without clear reporting triggered speculation about financial mismanagement or even illicit activity. Analysts emphasized that the investigation could take months, if not years. As agencies cross-referenced evidence, interviewed witnesses, and built a comprehensive case, every move by federal authorities would be scrutinized by both media and legal observers, making precision paramount. Political consequences were immediate and severe. Lawmakers demanded hearings to examine how such a situation could arise. Calls for stricter oversight of elected officials intensified, and some members of Congress suggested revisiting campaign finance laws and office security protocols. Political commentators debated whether the fallout could influence upcoming elections, particularly in Arizona, where the senator held significant influence. The national spotlight was squarely on the office, with political analysts noting that public perception could be as impactful as legal outcomes in shaping the senator's future. As investigators continued their work, the discovery of digital devices added another layer of complexity. Computers, encrypted drives, and mobile devices were secured for forensic analysis. Cybersecurity experts were called in to extract data, uncover patterns, and trace communications. The hope was to identify potential misconduct or lapses in protocol. Each file, email, and message had to be analyzed carefully, and investigators emphasized that even a single overlooked piece of evidence could prove pivotal. The stakes were high, both legally and politically, and the pressure to maintain airtight procedures was immense. The national media continued to frame the story as a cautionary tale about unchecked power and accountability. Opinion columns, panel discussions, and investigative reports explored the broader implications of the raid. Some analysts highlighted that the incident exposed systemic gaps in oversight, while others argued it reflected a need for increased transparency and ethics training for all public officials. The story had evolved beyond one senator's office. It had become a symbol of the ongoing struggle between federal enforcement and political autonomy. Even as day turned to night, federal investigators remained vigilant. Weapons were double-checked and stored securely. Financial records were audited repeatedly, and every detail of the raid was logged meticulously. The goal was to ensure that if legal proceedings moved forward, there would be no room for ambiguity or challenge. The pressure was immense, knowing that the eyes of the nation and the world were watching. Every decision, every move, carried weight far beyond the immediate investigation. By the end of the day, the ramifications were clear. This was more than a raid. It was a seismic moment in U.S. politics, a turning point that could redefine accountability standards for elected officials. Public discourse continued to be dominated by debates over legality, ethics, and political responsibility. The story was far from over, with investigators, political analysts, and citizens alike awaiting the next developments. The scale, scope, and implications of the raid ensured that it would remain a headline for weeks, capturing attention across the nation and setting a precedent for how such matters might be handled in the future. As the investigation progressed, the political and legal pressure intensified. Federal authorities remained steadfast in cataloging every piece of evidence, from the astonishing 2,847 weapons to the millions in unreported funds discovered during the raid. Analysts on national news networks emphasized the gravity of the situation, highlighting how rare it was for such a cache to be uncovered in a sitting senator's office. Every detail, from the serial numbers of firearms to the origin of each cache transaction, was under scrutiny, creating a sense of urgency among investigators and legal teams alike. Meanwhile, the senator's office struggled to maintain public composure. Internal communications suggested staffers were working around the clock, consulting with lawyers and preparing statements to mitigate political fallout. Leaked memos revealed debates over the timing of public announcements, aiming to minimize reputational damage while navigating the legal quagmire. Publicly, the office released carefully worded statements asserting cooperation with federal authorities, emphasizing adherence to due process and downplaying the severity of the findings. Yet, behind closed doors, panic was palpable as staff realized the sheer scale of the investigation and the potential consequences. The story quickly became a national talking point, dominating social media feeds and trending hashtags across platforms. Clips of federal agents moving firearms, counting cash, and securing offices circulated widely, sparking debates among citizens and commentators. Hashtags like #SenateRaid, #accountability, and #federal investigation trended, while political pundits dissected every nuance of the unfolding situation. Analysts speculated on possible outcomes, from criminal charges to political resignations, and examined the implications for federal oversight of elected officials. The public's reaction was polarized, with some lauding the federal agencies for rigorous enforcement, while others decried perceived overreach and political targeting. Simultaneously, the legal dimension of the case deepened. Investigators began interviewing witnesses, scrutinizing communications, and tracing the chain of custody for all assets discovered. Forensic accountants meticulously followed each dollar, determining whether any of the funds violated campaign finance laws or personal reporting requirements. Cybersecurity teams worked to extract encrypted data from seized digital devices, searching for patterns of misconduct or potential breaches of law. Every discovery, no matter how minor, had to be verified and documented, as even a small oversight could weaken the case or allow for legal challenges. Political ramifications were immediate. Fellow lawmakers expressed concern, demanding hearings to explore how such a situation could occur and what systemic failures allowed it to persist. Calls for reform in campaign finance, office security, and transparency standards grew louder, with several politicians highlighting the incident as proof that stronger oversight mechanisms were necessary. The raid not only implicated the individual senator but also ignited a broader conversation about ethical accountability for public officials. Nationwide public opinion continued to be shaped by media coverage and viral clips from the raid. Experts debated the balance between law enforcement authority and political independence, emphasizing that the investigation could serve as a precedent for future oversight of elected officials. Citizen engagement was high, with forums and online discussions dissecting every aspect of the case. The narrative extended beyond the immediate findings, touching on issues of trust, transparency, and the responsibility of those in positions of power. Inside federal agencies, the pace did not slow. Each firearm, document, and digital file was logged, analyzed, and cross-referenced. Investigators collaborated across departments, combining resources from law enforcement, financial oversight, and cybersecurity teams to build a comprehensive understanding of the case. Their goal was not only to establish the facts, but also to ensure that if prosecution or legal proceedings followed, the evidence would be indisputable. Precision, accuracy, and transparency were paramount at every stage. Meanwhile, political strategists watched closely, evaluating how the unfolding investigation could reshape the senator's career and the broader political landscape in Arizona. Analysts predicted potential impacts on upcoming elections, the balance of power in Congress, and public trust in elected officials. Every development was scrutinized, every statement analyzed for implications, and every social media trend interpreted for political insight. The raid had evolved from a legal action into a defining moment in the nation's political discourse. By the end of the day, the weight of the raid and its findings was undeniable. The scale of weapons, unreported funds, and digital evidence pointed to a complex web of oversight failures and potential misconduct. The public remained captivated. Political analysts continued their breakdowns, and federal investigators persisted in their meticulous work. What began as a single raid had transformed into a national conversation about accountability, transparency, and the limits of power. As news outlets updated their coverage and social media continued to buzz, one fact was clear: this case was far from over. Every development would have ripple effects across politics, law enforcement, and public perception. The story of the Arizona senator's office, the weapons, and the millions seized would remain a defining narrative, a cautionary tale, and a benchmark for accountability in American politics.